is we're heading into a period of political uncertainty, and there is some certainty which our region has. One of those things is we're growing. We're going to be 1 million people probably within 25 years. That's not a debate about whether we grow, it's that we are, and are we ready? And so a lot of the theme that we're going to touch on in our fireside chat will be around, are we ready to be 1 million people? But I can't miss the opportunity to let you start with some opening comments. But even before you do that, I got to get your hot take on the headlines. We have Trump tariffs coming, and then in the middle of that, the Liberals decided to self-immolate in Ottawa. Trump tariffs, Trudeau resigning. There's rumors there's going to be a provincial election, but certainly there's a lot of uncertainty. And the next 4 or 5 months are going to be a critical time for Ontario and for Canada. What's your sense of where things are at right now?
Well, before I do that, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to join you today, and great to see all of you to come out on a relatively cold Wednesday morning. And I want to give a big shout out to my colleague Ashlyn Clancy, the MPP for Kitchener Centre, who's just been such a strong advocate for her community, and my buddy Mike Morris, MP for Kitchener Centre. There was a time that people said that you'll never elect a Green in Ontario. And you have 3 of them sitting in this room, which I think says a lot about this region and the values of what this region stands for. And I think one of the things that separates the Green Party from other political parties is a desire to work across party lines to put people first before politics. And that's my answer to your question. I said this to the Canadian manufacturers and exporters right before we left Queen's Park in December. And I said it again yesterday, meeting with some major manufacturers in Guelph, that at this moment in time, we have to put partisan politics aside. We have to come together, all political parties, all levels of government, and have a Team Canada, Team Ontario approach. Nobody going rogue on any of this, because we have to defend Canadian workers, Canadian jobs, Canadian businesses. And, a 25% tariff is a real, I don't have to tell any of you this, is a real threat. And I think we're going to have carrots and sticks. Certainly trying to point out to our American neighbors the importance of our integrated supply chains, especially when you think of the auto sector. But I also think we have to be ready, for countervailing tariffs if it comes to that. And I hope it doesn't come to that. But, Ontario, 17 states, their number one destination for trade is Ontario. And you know what? We're going to have to make those states understand the negative implications that tariffs are going to have on their economy, and that it's mutually beneficial for us to continue the strategic relationship we have with the U.S., and I think it's going to take all parties and, like I said, all levels of government working together to deliver that message.
And I think maybe that's a good starting off point. Certainly over the last year or more, the Chamber and community partners have been analyzing the current economy across the Waterloo region, dealing with the inflation, high interest rates, et cetera. But we've also worked collaboratively, and we've got our friends from some of our friends from Best Waterloo with Communitech and Explore Waterloo and Waterloo EDC are here. And along with the Chambers talking about, are we ready to be 1 million people? We're going to have that growth. I guess that underlies everything that we're concerned about. So whether we're talking about healthcare, housing, and a new hospital, in transit infrastructure like LRT Phase 2, all-day two-way go, neighborhood development, all of those things. They all are things that, and we've been talking about, these aren't linear. They all have to be done at the same time, which is really problematic. But from your perspective, I would argue that it's not apparent that we're ready, and if we are, we need to communicate how we are getting ready across jurisdictions. But from a provincial, you're in Queen's Park. Maybe your thoughts on how ready we are, or what we need to do to get ready as a province to confront not only the immediate existential issues that you just highlighted, but how do we prepare ourselves for the next 20 or 25 years?
Yeah, well, I hate to say it, I don't think we're ready, and we're not just ready in Waterloo region. but I'd say across the province. And I think the biggest challenge we face right now, and there's multiple challenges, but the biggest one is housing affordability. Like housing starts have not kept up with population growth. And so there is no place in Ontario where a full-time worker can afford average monthly rent. There is no city in Ontario where my 25-year-old daughter has any chance of being able to buy a home. The levels of people experiencing homelessness are at unprecedented rates in the province of Ontario. And until we legalize housing and remove the barriers, especially for multiplexes and multi-residential buildings, so we can quickly ramp up housing supply in the communities that people know and love, close to where they work, close to where their families are, where we already have infrastructure built, we're not going to create the kind of housing supply we need until we bring in stronger protections for renters and make sure we reform the landlord-tenant board to benefit both landlords and tenants. Until we start actually once again building deeply affordable homes. 93% of the deeply affordable homes built in Ontario were built before 1995. That's when government stopped supporting nonprofit co-op and supportive housing. And so we've got to get back into providing those supports. But at the same time, we have to make sure our communities have the infrastructure they need. You know, I campaigned on all-day two-way go in 2014. And I was told by the government member I was running against at the time, oh, don't worry, that's going to be built. We still don't have a bill. We don't even have a timeline for all-day two-way go. LRT2 in the region is critical to building out housing supply. We need investments in wastewater infrastructure, electrical infrastructure. I mean, I can't tell you how many developers who've talked to me about, we don't even have the electricity capacity to service their developments. So those types of investments are going to be critically important, and we're going to need investments in our social infrastructure. I think we all know that our healthcare system's in a state of crisis. We have 2.5 million or growing to 5 million people without access to a primary care physician, a family doctor. We have, we don't have enough childcare spaces. We have overcrowded classrooms. All that's going to take investment. And so I think we need to have an honest conversation with the people of Ontario about what it's going to take to make those investments in a fiscally responsible way. And that's why I find it so problematic that we're sending $200 checks to millionaires and billionaires when we don't have enough money to invest in healthcare, to invest in childcare, to invest in the infrastructure. We need to actually build more homes. And so I think one of the conversations we need to have in what likely will be a provincial election is having an honest conversation with the people of Ontario about what it's going to take to build our communities and ensure we're ready for 1 million people in Waterloo region.
And so let me ask this question this way. If you were elected as premier of the province, and I say that, I mean, no one knows what's going to happen at the end of the provincial election. Maybe it's a majority, maybe it's a minority, but regardless of the outcome, if you had the opportunity and you were elected or in a position to make some of those decisions in that first 90 days, you can tell a lot about what the priorities are of government. And so not with specifics of which policy, but how would say, here is the challenge which you've just described in front of us. What would be that first 90 days look like so that you can say, here is our priorities. We will get to the legislation and the practical how to do it parts. But what would your first 90 days look like to this audience to say that we are going to get on top of all those challenges?
Yeah, my top 3 priorities would be housing, healthcare, and infrastructure. To me, those are the critical things that we're going to have to address. The Ontario Greens, we have detailed plans about how we would address all of them, but that would be our first 90-day priority.
Well, and the part most of our members would say we are small businesses. The chambers are we have large businesses, some of them here like Manulife, and they help sustain the community, obviously, but most of our members are small business. Talk a little bit about, in the context of the priorities that we have to make and the decisions that we have to make, how do we get the small business sector, how would you support them? Like, what are the things that we're going to do, because there's affordability issues for cost of doing business and for the employees that that work there. So there's an element of the employees and small businesses are interlinked. How do you support the small business community in being a part of the solution?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I was a longtime small business owner before I ever went into politics. And so I know what it's like to start and grow a business. And I remember when we hit 15 employees and we were doing well over $1 million in sales. And I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not a small business anymore. Like this is like we're really moving. And I can tell you one of the biggest challenges we faced was making sure we have a tax structure that supports small businesses. And one of the reasons I was such a strong advocate for raising the exemption for the employer health tax to $1 million was that so a business like mine could invest in employees and grow their business without having tax penalties for doing that before we even made a profit. And so I'll give the government credit. Actually, early in the Ford government's mandate, they actually brought in that proposal. But I think now 6 years later, it's time to raise it again. That helps growing businesses be able to invest in employees and growing their businesses. And it helps existing small businesses be able to increase their payroll and what they pay their employees without hitting that threshold for the employer health tax. At the same time, I will say another challenge we faced, even when I was running my business, and the challenge has gotten way harder today, and I hear this from businesses all the time, is their employees can't afford to live in the communities they work. And that's why housing is so critically important. That's why we have to remove the barriers to increase housing supply. That's why we have to pass Ashland Clancy's bill to protect renters from bad acting landlords. It's why we have to start investing once again in deeply affordable nonprofit co-op and supportive housing, because our employees deserve to live in the communities they work in. And our small businesses deserve to have the stability of employees that live near where they work. And that is critically important. And it's something we're going to continue to fight for until we actually solve this crisis.
I wouldn't be doing my job, and I think Darren's here. I think I see him somewhere. There he is, chair of the Grand River Hospital Foundation board, or on the board. We have not had a new hospital in Waterloo Region in 60 years, more than 60 years actually. It's if there is one asset everyone would talk about, and this includes our friends in North Dumfries and Cambridge. We need a new hospital in Kitchener-Waterloo, and then we got to quickly start thinking about the next phase of what happening in Cambridge in the hospital there, because we are going to serve not only the 1 million people that will live here in 25 years, but we have a catchment area of 2 million people in the province of Ontario. So I guess this is the next version of all day two-way go, and we're going to keep fighting for that. But talk a little bit about the importance of investing and committing to the new hospital here. We've got a site selected with the University of Waterloo. We're into the next stages of the never-ending decision-making process with the Ministry of Health. But talk about the importance of a new hospital here in Waterloo Region. And I presume you've said you're committed to that for this part of the world, amongst others. But maybe talk about the importance of that for this region.
Yeah, well, a new hospital is critically important. We need one for Guelph too, just by the way. So, because our communities are connected. Because I know people from Guelph come to Kitchener-Waterloo for care, and people from KW come to Guelph for care. So we're both working together on this one for hospitals in both areas. But you know what I'm tired of? I'm tired of Ontario being dead last in per capita healthcare funding of any province in the country. We're dead last. Our hospitals are some of the most efficient hospitals anywhere in the world. I've seen their metrics. We run good hospitals in this province, and yet we have hospitals in Ontario taking out lines of credit. We have hospitals taking out lines of credit to pay their existing lines of credit because they're underfunded. And the other thing that's underfunded is primary health care and community-based health care, and the underfunding of people not having access to a family doctor or primary care physician, the people not having access for a place to take their kids, and then they have to go to emerge, puts incredible additional pressure on our hospitals. So when we think about the need to build a new hospital, we have to think about all the other investments that need to happen. For example, the unprecedented level of homelessness that we're experiencing in our communities put tremendous pressure on our hospitals, because a lot of those folks end up in emergency departments because they have no other place to go, or because they have more acute healthcare needs. And so when we think about investments in healthcare, we have to not only think about the investments in the healthcare system, we also have to think about all the investments in the social supports in our communities to help take pressure off of our healthcare system. And then the final point I want to make is we have to start treating the people, the frontline workers in our healthcare system, with the respect they deserve. They need fair pay, fair wages, fair benefits, and better working conditions. We have about 15,000 nurses right now in Ontario who are registered to practice and are not practicing nursing because they feel so disrespected by the provincial government, and especially wage freeze legislation. And how can we expect people to care for us and our loved ones if we as a province don't care for them and ensure that they get the respect they deserve as frontline healthcare workers? And so we need people in those buildings. And everybody I know in healthcare, from the CEOs of hospitals to hospital boards to, family health team administrators, people in home care and long-term care, the number one thing they will tell you is we have to invest in the people that deliver that care. And right now in Ontario, we're failing to do that.
So specific, and I think that's a great point. Specifically, that our chamber has been the community lead for family physician recruitment for, I don't know, 25 years. And unfortunately the problem continues to grow. And it's not just family doctors. I think you touched on this. It's nurse case practitioners and community care, and how you have access for the right type of care at the right time. But if we think about primary care, still until the system changes, is the gateway to healthcare. What are some of the things that you think we should be doing in order to get on top of what is, and this is not just an Ontario problem, this is a national problem, it's an international problem of having enough primary care in the right places at the right time. What are some of the things that we should be doing as a province to get on top of it?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, what a ridiculous waste of tax dollars that almost every municipality in this province spends money recruiting primary care physicians, and we're all competing against each other. So Guelph's competing with Kitchener's, competing with Waterloo and Cambridge and Toronto, et cetera, et cetera. So why don't we just properly fund the system? And so one of the negative outcomes of underfunding our healthcare system is it means we misappropriate tax dollars to try to paper over and put band-aids on the underfunding of the system. And so why not just fund the system properly, first of all? When it comes to primary care, 100% agree. I think the key reform that needs to happen in Ontario is in primary care, because that is the gateway to people's health. It's the way we can prevent people from becoming even sicker than they maybe are. It provides the services and supports that families and communities need. And one of the most important things we can do is start moving to a model of team-based care. If you talk to especially young primary healthcare providers, they want to practice as part of teams. Doctors, nurse practitioners, nurses, nutritionists, mental health workers, social workers, physiotherapists, all working together in a team-based care, because it takes the pressure off the individual. I can't tell you how many primary healthcare providers talk about just get rid of the paperwork burden. Most young doctors are like, I got into medicine to care for people, not to spend 3 days doing paperwork. And team-based care can help reduce some of that paperwork. Utilizing electronic healthcare, the fact that faxes still dominate the healthcare system. I just had a doctor and a nurse practitioner in my office the other day saying, can you just tell the province to mandate e-prescriptions so I don't have to send an e-prescription in, and then I don't know if the pharmacy got it, so then I fax the prescription in, and then the pharmacy's looking and going, I don't know, do I fill both the prescriptions? Like, just the amount of time that waste, the cost, the aggravation for healthcare providers. Having our healthcare workers work at a full scope of practice, especially for nurse practitioners. There's so much that nurse practitioners could do that family doctors do now, if we just allowed them to work at their full scope of practice. So there's a whole host of things I think we can do around addressing primary healthcare challenges. I will, in the interest of nonpartisanship, give the government some credit that they are expanding placements now for training of new doctors and nurses. I absolutely, we shouldn't have cut back on that previously. So it is one step forward. But if we don't address some of these other systemic issues, particularly around administrative burden, team-based care, things like that, just the model of practice, then we're going to have challenges recruiting people to actually stay in the profession. And so we have to address those things as well as recruiting new healthcare providers.
We talked a little earlier this morning because I hear you when I hear the word facts in healthcare. It's bizarre that that's still a thing. But modernization of government in the way we are today, we have friends in Communitech, and we've got founders and innovative companies that can help with a wide variety of not just public services, but productivity improvements for business. But specifically, we have the eHealth Center of Excellence here. Is it those types of things that we should be saying that the province needs to be taking those innovations, which are real, they're being used, but they're not being deployed everywhere they could be? Are those the types of things that, in terms of modernization of healthcare in this case, but are the types of things that we should be doing to modernize government as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we have to get over the failure of the e-health scandal that it happened in Ontario, almost 20 years ago now. We have to get past that. I think government has to learn from that mistake. But I mean, one of the great things about the Waterloo region is the expertise is here. A lot of the tools have already been built. They just need to be deployed. And I think the government has to step up and deploy it. And then when they do deploy it, they're going to have to require practitioners to actually use it. Because one of the things I'm hearing is some of the tools that are out there, e-prescriptions being one of them, e-referrals being another one, are just not being used. And so even when we're deploying the technology, it's not being used. And the province has to play a critical role in leadership and saying, one, we're going to implement these tools, and two, we're actually going to force you to use these tools because we need those kinds of efficiencies in the system.
I want to turn a little bit. We've seen some labor relations things, which the rail strikes. We've seen port strikes in over the last year. They have the potential to cripple the Canadian economy, and we've seen that. We've seen when we had both port and rail strikes. But we also have a new modern economy that rests on different types of core infrastructure, electricity, Wi-Fi, the ability to for all of the electronic business that takes place. How do we make sure that those what are now those core pieces of infrastructure that still have roads, bridges, ports, railways, because that's a lot of moving the goods across the country, but we also have this other what I would say is core infrastructure that business and communities rely on. How should the province be addressing those types of things, and whether it's right to strike or other things? But how do we, again, this is more of a modernization question, saying we're not keeping up with saying some of the things that are core to business functioning we just haven't come to grips with how we make those things essential services, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should take away labor rights or reduce labor unions' bargaining abilities and power, because that's how workers have a voice. That's how we can ensure workers can negotiate the fair wages and better working conditions they need. I do think on a case-by-case basis, there are considerations that need to be made in terms of the broader economy. But over 95% of labor negotiations settle at the table. And I think the what was a pending college instructor strike is a great example of, we just learned last night that both sides agree to go to binding arbitration when they couldn't reach an agreement. Those are the kinds of, I think, important agreements that make all stakeholders feel that their voice is heard, that they're empowered, that they're able to negotiate and defend their rights. Now, I can tell you there are certain cases, and one of a tough vote I made in my first term in office was in the winter of 2018, 2019. 300 power workers were going to go on strike, and I was told by the independent electricity system operator that potentially would have shut down Ontario's grid going into the holiday season. And so I told the government, I'm not going to vote for back to work legislation, but I would vote for legislation that would take it to binding arbitration so they could settle a deal in our grid when it be threatened. And, so the government took that route, and I actually voted with the government on that. So I think some of it's on a case by case basis, but I think in general, we should be defending workers' rights to bargain. And I think in the long run, that strengthens companies, employers, as well as employees and our economy as a whole.
Okay, we're going to move on to something, and I'm going to do a little bit of a preface here because we're going to talk about land assembly, and I know that that's a contentious issue, at least for some. But I want to rewind the tape a little bit. I've been at the chamber 14 and a half years. Over 12 years ago, when Schneider's left town, they left town because we didn't have any large site to accommodate them to stay, meaning a large mega site. We've known, and I can tell you that Gregory of the Cambridge Chamber and myself have been talking about this ever since. Certainly the last number of years, 5 or 6 years, Tony at the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation has been saying we need to have these large sites. This is not a new discussion that's been happening in Waterloo region. We do not have large site to accommodate the large employers. So context piece here, I think, is important. We don't have sites to accommodate those anchor employers. If we're going to be 1 million people, we're going to need tens of thousands of new jobs, and those are not all going to come from small businesses, much as a lot of them will, some of them won't. So I just wanted to put that context, and we've been supportive of the Wilmot Land Assembly because of how important it is to sustaining. And I would say, I'm not speaking on behalf of Toyota, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that if we don't have a battery plant for Toyota for their coming hybrid and electric vehicles down the road, that the auto producers that sustain a big chunk of our economy, they will produce cars where they have battery plants. So I want to put that context. I'm saying, but we right now can't even offer Toyota a place in Waterloo region, which is why this land assembly is so important. I know there's lots of complexity to it, but I wanted to put that context. It is a contentious debate. Where do we fall on the balance? And this is a balance of saying, how do we have large land assembled for the job creation, the jobs that we need to sustain us into the future, at the same time balancing the environmental issues, sustainability issues, which I think are real. But we have to, how do we square that circle? Because saying that we're just not going to have large land assembled here in Waterloo region is not an answer. So I wanted to, I know we may disagree on this, but I think the important part of this is, where are people going to work when we're 1 million people? That's the place that we start from. Is we have 1 million people in Waterloo region 25 years from now, where are they going to work?
So let me tell you where we agree, and because we've talked about this before. So where we agree is land assembly is important. We do need to have sites. I think those sites need to be developed in a transparent and open planning process. I don't think they should be imposed by the province. It's something the region, like I've always admired Waterloo Region's countryside line plan and just the region's planning in general and how thoughtful it was. And I'm disappointed that the province has intervened in ways to expand the countryside line and possibly put pressure, though that's disputed, around the Wilmot Land Assembly. But the other thing we have to recognize at the same time is the food and farming sector contributes over $50 billion to Ontario's economy, employs over 880,000 people. It's the largest employer. I'm talking about the largest employer in Guelph is Linamar, automotive assembly parts plants. So I'm very pro auto sector, especially as we electrify the auto sector. But I also have to recognize that we can't pave over the asset base that contributes $50 billion to Ontario's economy and employs over 880,000 people, especially when only 0.5% of Ontario's land mass is prime farmland. So I would say let's assemble the land in places that's not that small amount of prime farmland. And unfortunately, in the situation in Wilmot that's some of the best farmland in North America. It is prime farmland. And we're in a situation where our prime farmland is going to become even more important and more valuable because we're one of the few places in the world that you can grow over 250 varieties of crops because of two primary reasons. One is our soil conditions, and two is because of the way the Great Lakes affect our weather patterns here. And as we're seeing around the world, we're seeing increasing droughts. We're seeing increasing levels of severe extreme weather events caused by, the climate crisis. The ability of Ontario to grow food is even going to become more valuable to the world. And so we have to recognize that economic contribution as well and assemble land that isn't that 0.5% of Ontario's land mass that's prime farmland.
I'm gonna say let's end on where we agree, which is we need to have land assembled, because I would argue that the land that we've chosen is not the prime agricultural land you're talking about. But the fact of the matter,
I'm going to go with what soil scientists tell me. So.
Well, we've done some, and I would say the other part is we need to change the entire municipal and planning process, because this is the way that you've assembled land forever in Ontario. It may need to change, but that's a separate question. Okay. Until it does, this is the process we're under. But the fact is, it's good. We do need to have large tracts of land for large employers if we're going to be a large city. You just need anchor employers like the Toyotas of the world that sustain, or Conestoga Meats or others that are going to be that are going to sustain our economy. So I'm going to take that as there's still room for us to come together on that.
There's room for conversation.
Yeah,
absolutely. No, I think that's it. No, it's important. Like I think it's important publicly and transparently to have conversations like this where we can honestly disagree with each other, but then figure out where we agree, and then how do we find a solution to what we agree on. And so I 100% agree with you on land assembly. Let's just do it in the right way, in the right places. That's all.
Okay, let's move on. I mean, we talked this morning, and Julie from Conestoga College was here. One of the things that is really important is for us as a province is, and we, no joke, being a plumber, an electrician, or a skilled trade these days, you make a lot more than MPPs. You mentioned this morning. Sure. But let's talk about the education system. I think there is a mismatch sometimes in the jobs of the future, which are skilled trades or advanced manufacturing that may not require a university. The colleges play a huge role, and we've already talked about this with our friends from CLAC around healthcare workers, around the skilled trades. Conestoga's developing all of those. It seems to me, and I hear this from educators in the high school sector, and you've mentioned it this morning, it doesn't feel like we're from the time the kids start going to school, we're not setting them up for saying what are their choices and what are their career opportunities as it relates to some of those core skills that don't necessarily involve university education. So maybe talk about that and the tech aspect of this too, of making sure that we have tech literate students and that we're preparing them for the jobs that will be coming into the future.
Yeah. So first of all, before I get into some of the details in answering this, another thing that I'm tired of being last in Ontario is funding for post-secondary education. We're last in healthcare. We're last in post-secondary education. As a matter of fact, it would take a $5 billion investment annually in Ontario just to get Ontario's post-secondary education investments up to the Canadian average. And so to me, as somebody who's was a business owner myself, who recognizes the critical role that universities and colleges play in both pure research and applied research and in educating young people to be productive citizens and productive employees, like, I'm worried we're going to start losing our advantage in Ontario if we don't actually, again, have a honest conversation about how important it is to invest in our post-secondary sector and what it contributes to our communities. And I know there's been a lot of criticism thrown at the post-secondary sector for the use of international students. I know Conestoga has been front and center in some of that controversy. But the reality is when you freeze funding, you freeze tuition, you provide no revenue streams for our colleges and universities to survive, and the only thing government allows them to do besides improve their endowments is international students. That's where they're going to turn, because you've essentially told them that's where you have to go. And so we have to fix the system, because the system is so valuable to Ontario's competitive advantage on multiple levels. When it comes to the trades, I think we have to start younger. I think, again, I can be hard on the Ford government. I will compliment them on their investments in the trades. Like, the government is starting to make investments in promoting the trades and training in the trades. And I think those are important and good investments. But at the same time, we have to support businesses to take on apprentices in the trades, because that's a huge barrier right now. So providing financial incentives for employers to bring on apprentices so they can complete their training. We have to make investments in elementary and high school, but especially high school. Like, I don't know what it's like here, but when I visit high schools in Guelph, like, most of the trades, they were built like 20, 30 years ago. Like, they're the rooms that students don't want to go to. They don't feel very inviting. So how are we going to promote young people to go into the trades if we don't make the trades an exciting environment, exciting place to go in high schools, for example? We need to start, especially when it comes to young women, start talking about the opportunities that exist in the trades, in terms of the fact that you do make more money as a plumber, as an electrician, and other trades than you do as an MPP. So these are good paying jobs. These are jobs that are critical to Ontario's future. And if I could just put my climate hat on, to address the climate crisis is going to take the largest building effort, maybe in Canadian history, certainly since the end of World War II. Like, we're going to have to build out homes. We're going to have to retrofit homes. We're going to have to electrify our transportation systems. We're going to have to build mass quantities of additional electricity generation and distribution. We're going to have to build factories that deal with advanced manufacturing and low carbon production methods. Like, it is going to be a huge building effort. And we have to train people to do that. And we have to let young people especially know that these are meaningful jobs that not only provide a good living for you, but if you want to be a climate activist, be an electrician, because we need a heck of a lot of electricity. And one of the best ways you can help reduce climate pollution and benefit our economy at the same time and make life more affordable for people is to actually become an electrician. But I don't think most young people know that, because we're not teaching that in our schools. And so it has to start young, and it has to be connected to our colleges. And I just want to say one quick thing on Conestoga, because when we talk about healthcare and colleges and training, I want to talk about like the kind of innovation we need that's happening in Conestoga's campus in Guelph right now. Is Guelph General Hospital now is setting up an offsite diagnostical and surgical center at Conestoga that will be staffed by Conestoga students. So that's the kind of innovation we need. We're taking pressure off of our hospital. We're taking things out of the hospital that can be done in the community. It's still being publicly funded, publicly delivered, part of our public healthcare system, and perfectly integrated with our college to train students on what they need to do. Those are the kinds of innovations we're going to need in the sector to not only address what the post-secondary sector needs, but also what we need in our social infrastructure like healthcare.
Okay, we're down to our last
Okay.
six
try to be
minutes, so I'm
quicker
going to
now.
ask short questions, and you can power
Okay,
through them.
sounds good.
But I want to build on that. I mean, we've got two mayors of municipalities. We know that municipalities, whether they're urban in southern Ontario, whether they're rural or northern, all have challenges around infrastructure. And you've talked about the other infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure, municipal infrastructure, community infrastructure. How should we be looking? I mean, and I'm sympathetic to this. I was a municipal councillor for 7 years. I've been around it for a long time. The current system of funding does not work for whatever year we're in, 2025 now. It does not work. It was designed 75 years ago. Development charges don't work because they're all complete out of whack. You know, North Toronto versus, I mean, it just makes no sense. What are the things that you would do as problems? Because that's something that is a big thing. It won't be politically, I don't think very attractive because it's complicated. But boy, it needs to be dealt with. Like, we cannot keep using 1950s public policy tools for 2025. How would you kind of address making sure that municipalities are partnering and have the tools they need to partner with the province and for our national health as a country?
Yeah, well, we definitely need a new deal for municipalities, and I would argue we're using 19th century tools in the 21st century when it comes to municipalities. The infrastructure, I think Barry said that earlier today, so I got to give him credit for it.
He did say that. So Barry's being quoted.
Okay, I got to quote Barry. I got to give him. I saw him look at me like I got to give him credit for that.
He's being quoted or plagiarized. Take your pick.
Yeah, exactly. But the hard infrastructure backlog for municipalities in Ontario right now is $54 billion. That's just to maintain existing infrastructure, not to build new infrastructure. So what just drives me bananas is we're talking about spending hundreds of billions of dollars building a tunnel under the 401. We're talking about building $12 billion to build Highway 413 when we have 407 right next to it, completely underutilized. And municipalities can't keep roads and bridges open. Their water and wastewater systems are completely over capacity. They don't have the financial resources to actually maintain existing infrastructure, let alone build new infrastructure. So first of all, we need stable, predictable, bankable infrastructure funding for municipalities. These one-off program grant just doesn't work, and it doesn't allow them to properly plan fiscally. And then the second thing, we need municipalities to have additional revenue tools. I think the province has to upload many of the things like shelter and housing costs that they downloaded onto municipalities in the 1990s. All the short answer is we need a new deal, we need a new fiscal framework, and we can't keep putting all this on the backs of property taxpayers when the province and the federal government have the fiscal tools that are more appropriate to deal with infrastructure and social service needs.
Okay, I want to build on that because I think it's an important, and I agree with that. But then you get to tax levels, right? I mean, because there's only one taxpayer. Anything that happens is it's either going to be a property tax owner or it's going to be a taxpayer who are the same person. And there's federal and provincial tax, and there's still only one taxpayer. What can we expect from a green government, or the philosophy if there was a minority government and you have some influence over tax policy? What would the tax policy be about? How you address it from a personal tax and business taxes?
So first of all, we have to stop disproportionately giving tax breaks and affordability measures that disproportionately benefit wealthy Ontarians. And let me just give you some quick examples. We spend over $7 billion a year in Ontario. It's like the 5th highest line item in the provincial budget to be the only jurisdiction in North America to directly subsidize electricity prices, disproportionately benefits wealthy people. Why are we spending $3 billion a year sending $200 checks to millionaires and billionaires when that should be targeted to people who are, most in financial need? The whole license sticker gimmick cost $3 billion in the first year and is costing us almost $2 billion each year after that. Again, disproportionately benefited wealthier households that own multiple vehicles. And this isn't a soak the rich or, say bad things about people who've been successful financially. It's just, we have to have a system that's more fair than we have right now. And quite frankly, back in the 1950s and 60s, when our economy was booming, we were growing, part of what fueled that growth was investment in infrastructure, and part of what funded that was marginal tax rates for higher income earners were higher than they are today. So we can't put this on the backs of property taxpayers, many of them on fixed incomes, and we can't put it on the backs of working and middle income folks. We need wealthier folks in the province to step up, pay a bit more, because they're going to benefit from that, and we're all going to benefit from that. Because if we don't address these infrastructure, healthcare, post-secondary deficits, we're all going to pay the price for that, and it's going to be harder to become a successful business owner, entrepreneur in this province, because we're not going to have the infrastructure or the highly trained workforce to fuel that success. And so that's a hard conversation I'm sorry, I'm going longer, so let's be quick. But that's a hard conversation to have, because I know people, and everybody in politics knows this. People want more services for government and they don't want to pay for it. And so I think it's incumbent upon us, and I've had this conversation with my own voters in Guelph, that you may not like some of what I'm advocating for, but I'm going to be honest with you about it. Ashland's going to be honest with you about it, because we have to start having an honest conversation about how we build the communities, the society, and the economy we want. And if we're not going to be honest about it, we're not going to solve these issues.
Listen, it's okay to go long, because a politician actually answering questions, actually answering questions is refreshing. So, listen, and that's only a half joke, but I appreciate the honesty. Let us. I'm going to finish with the last question. I know we're a couple minutes over, so just wanted to give you a minute to say, I think when someone says, "Oh, geez, who would I vote for?" You got the NDP, the Liberals, and the Conservatives. What would a green government mean? Things have happened. The federal Liberals went from next to nothing to government, so anything's possible in this day and age. What if the Green Party was elected as the government of Ontario? What would it mean? How would you run the government thematically? What could business and individuals expect?
Well, they can expect a government that's going to build homes, or expect a government that's going to fix the healthcare system, expect a government that's going to invest in affordability measures that also reduce climate pollution and set our economy up for success, where we're seeing $2 trillion worth of investment going into the green energy transition. I want that investment in Ontario to create Ontario jobs, to benefit Ontario workers, and generate prosperity in our communities. But what you can expect more than anything else, and I think this is a thing that separates Greens from every other party, is I am not Ashland Clancy's boss. People of Kitchener Centre are her boss. And when she votes, I don't know where she went. She left for this part of the conversation. Same thing for Matt Richter and Perry Salmuskoka, and I could go on and on and on. We haven't voted the same on every issue. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that, because she is Kitchener's voice. And that's the same for every Green MPP that's elected in this province. We have, in Canada, have centralized so much power in the Premier's office, in the Prime Minister's office, and in the Leader's office. And that has to change. We actually need a government that's going to stand up and have their elected representatives be the voice of their constituents, not the voice of their leader. And that's the thing that separates Greens more than any other party. And I'm proud that when people said a Green could never get elected in Ontario, we've elected 3 now. We're going to elect more because I think people want a new way of doing politics, and they want to know that their local representative is their voice in Ottawa and in Queen's Park.
Listen, thanks so much, Mike, for spending time with us today. We've come to the end of our time. I'll close up and then we'll let you go. Again, thanks once again to our sponsors and partners, our title sponsor, our good friends at Manulife, our community partner, North Guide, and Julie's here, production sponsor, Good Co Productions, and our host here at Binghamton's Hospitality. Of course, thanks to all of you for attending in person today, and for those of you joining us virtually, for your continued support in making these events possible. We have 3 more in the Provincial Leaders Series coming up. Stay tuned. I think all those are going to be posted later today or tomorrow. And there's lots of events coming up. And check us out at greaterkwchamber.com. If you haven't got enough of Green Leader Mike Schreiner, we're negotiating. He will be on Business to Business on 570 News, powered by Cowan Insurance, in the coming weeks. So thanks everyone for coming today, and we'll see you at the next event.
Thank you.